Welcome into another episode of In the Bonus. My name is Jorie Mickens, and on this episode of In the Bonus, we'll be taking a look at a game between the Denver Nuggets and the Phoenix Suns. Yes, I know I've done way too many In the Bonus episodes on the Nuggets, and you probably know at this point that I am a fan of the Denver Nuggets, but I feel like this game was worthy of an In the Bonus episode as the Nuggets took down the Phoenix Suns 130-126 in overtime. This was a very fun game throughout. The Nuggets battled back from a pretty big deficit. I don't know exactly the deficit. Again, this was a game that I wasn't even going to talk about because I figured, well, I've already done two of these on the Nuggets, and I don't want people thinking this is the only team I'm going to cover. But again, as it went on, I was like, this is a really interesting game, and I might really have to talk about what had transpired and what I'd seen from not only the Nuggets and the Suns. I think I'll probably focus more on the Suns more during this episode. But yeah, it was a really good watch, to be honest, especially down the stretch. It was a lot of fun. There's a few controversial calls down the stretch that went in the Nuggets' favor, and I think it certainly helped them win this game. But at the end of the day, that's how the NBA works, I guess. But in this one, we saw Nikola Jokic have yet another phenomenal performance: 31 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists for him, as well as 3 steals, one of which came in the waning seconds of the game. A huge defensive play by Jokic, and I mentioned on one of our episodes of the Full Court Report NBA show that I think Jokic is somewhat of an underrated defender in the sense that he's not a highlight defender where you're going to see him on ESPN or SportsCenter or wherever getting something like a chase down block or, a huge block to deny a poster dunk or anything like that. But he's just really smart. And offensively, obviously, we know how high his basketball IQ is. He's making phenomenal passes all throughout the game. He's finding teammates where even us as viewers don't even understand how that ball can get into, that place like that and get to the teammates' hands and things like that. Defensively, Jokic, he has the same brain on that side of the floor. And we saw that again tonight. So he had a huge steal at the end of the game that really solidified the Nuggets win. So again, 3 steals for him. Good defensive, solid defensive game for Jokic. And then I guess some other players we could touch on. Jamal Murray. He was watching Jamal Murray in this one. It was he looked okay when he was attacking the rim. And I was actually reading an article earlier today about the somewhat minuscule improvement that Jamal Murray has made throughout this season. A lot of people picked him to be a candidate for most improved player because, last season, before the season shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic, he was only averaging something like 18 points per game. And then obviously when he went to the bubble, everyone got to witness bubble Jamal Murray, where he was putting up 30 points left and right in nearly every game he played. And everyone kind of expected him to kind of carry over that sort of play into this season, and it hasn't necessarily happened. And in this game, he had 18 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists, so a pretty solid stat line. But he was, again, it was, I think his jump shots are where you see his deficiencies. Attacking the rim, I think, again, so I'll reference that article that I was reading. Jamal Murray this season has been one of the best finishers in the NBA. And that's not even a hyperbole. I believe he's on this season shooting around above 80% at the rim, which is like Giannis-esque. He's absolutely phenomenal when he gets to the basket, and that was evident once again today. He could really, once he got to the rim, there's no stopping him. But he shot 0-5 from 3, and 8 for 19 overall on the game. So again, it was really the jump shots that were hurting him. And I kept telling myself, Jamal, just attack the rim, and you'll either draw a foul. He only took 2 free throws in this game. You're either going to draw a foul or you're going to convert the layup. Because, I mean, more than 80% of the time, he's been converting his layups. So, again, I feel like the shot selection for Jamal needs to change somewhat. He's taking just tough jumpers. Like, he takes this turnaround fade inside the arc a lot of the times over tall defenders. You know, at some points he would have DeAndre Ayton on a switch, and instead of just attacking the rim and either getting to the basket or drawing a foul, he would try and do like a turnaround fade over DeAndre Ayton, who's like almost 7 feet tall or something, 7 feet tall. He would try and do the same thing over Mikal Bridges, who has a freakishly long wingspan. Cameron Johnson, whoever it was guarding him, he would continuously take these mid-range jumpers, and instead of attacking the rim, I feel like the shot selection for Jamal Murray is really what's holding him back from being that elite scorer that we saw in the bubble. And it could also be because of injury. I think him and even Mike Malone, the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, have referenced on a few occasions this season that Jamal is dealing with some kind of nagging injury, and that could somewhat be limiting him on that side of the floor. So that could also be part of it, but that's just one thing, or one takeaway at least, that I saw in this game with Jamal Murray. I guess just one more player that I want to touch on for the Nuggets at least, and then I'll certainly talk about the Suns a little bit more, is Monte Morris. Monte Morris is, I can't say enough about how much I love Monte Morris. Again, I feel like whoever is listening to this probably knows that I'm a Denver Nuggets fan at this point. I've probably mentioned it on the show a few times, and then evident by the fact that this is the 3rd time I'm talking about this team early on in the season. You probably know that I root for the Denver Nuggets, and Monte Morris is one of my favorite Denver Nuggets of all time. And I know that sounds crazy. He doesn't even start for this team, but he is just such an underrated player in this league. I mean, literally, if he wasn't on the Nuggets and Jamal Murray wasn't really the player for Denver that got all the money, and the team obviously wants to build around with him and Jokic, he would be starting. And I think Monte Morris could have been starting on a handful of teams in the NBA, probably more than half. He had 17 points in this game, 6 of 10 from the field, 3 assists. Enough cannot be said about his impact. If we're being honest, he might be the second best player, or at least has been the second best player this season for Denver. Michael Porter Jr. is a player who made his return to the team today. He played 20 minutes, scored 7 points, collected 6 rebounds in this one. Maybe if he had been playing, I think he missed like 10 games, Michael Porter Jr. Maybe if he had been playing this whole time, that I wouldn't be saying the same thing about Monte Morris. But Monte Morris has just been outstanding this season. And the fact that he signed a contract extension with this team in the offseason was huge. They lost Jeremy Grant, but retaining Monte Morris was one of the most underrated signings really in the NBA, I think, for the Nuggets. Again, enough cannot be said about his impact. I really do think he should be a starter in the NBA, and it just so happens that he's on the Nuggets. I think he's the best. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, but it's hard to argue that he's not the best backup point guard in the NBA. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head at the moment. I could be forgetting someone pretty obvious, but the way he plays, the way I've seen him play, not just this year, in the past couple of years, he's been the best, in my opinion. I think he's the best backup point guard in the NBA, and again, should certainly be starting somewhere. There's a handful of teams that could use his prowess as a point guard, as a scorer, as a facilitator. He does everything so well, and despite the fact that he's limited with his size. He's a pretty solid defender. He's just really intense. But moving on, I don't want to. I spent 10 minutes talking about the Denver Nuggets after telling everyone that I wouldn't talk about the Denver Nuggets as much as I want to. But hey, let's move on for the Suns. The Suns, they played a really good game. Devin Booker, 31 points for him, 5 assists as well. Devin Booker in this game, he was just making hustle plays left and right. Everyone knows what Devin Booker does. He's one of the best shot creators, one of the best scorers in the NBA. He can really get it done from anywhere. But kind of what surprised me is how hard he plays. And I don't know if this is somewhat newfound for him or because, Chris Paul is now his teammate and we all know the competitor that Chris Paul is, and maybe that is rubbing off on Devin Booker. But Devin Booker made some hustle plays in this game. He had a huge chase down block late in the game. He was diving for loose balls, going for offensive rebounds at points throughout the game. I mean, he was just doing it all. You would think he was a role player the way he was playing in this one against the Nuggets. And again, he led this team in scoring with 31. I mean, Devin Booker, he's absolutely phenomenal. And, the Suns, their future is so bright. I know that Chris Paul, he's, I think, 36 years old this season, and I wouldn't expect him to be around with the Phoenix Suns much longer after this season or maybe after next season even. Moving forward, I would imagine they have to find another kind of point guard to fill that spot with, fill Chris Paul's spot in that rotation. But this team is so young. I'm sure some people have heard that this team has been nicknamed the Bright Future Suns. I mean, you definitely saw that on display in this game because of their young core that they have with, again, Devin Booker, who I already mentioned, Mikal Bridges, who at one point in the game was 6 for 6 from 3. I mean, he couldn't miss. He literally could not miss from 3. Finished 6 for 8, but he had 24 points in this game, 10 rebounds for Mikal Bridges. I've always liked Mikal Bridges so much. I mean, he went coming out of Villanova. I knew that guy was going to be a stud. This is the same reason why I like Saddiq Bey so much from this past year's draft class. Does Villanova guys just know how to get it done? Dante DiVincenzo is another one. I'm sure I'm forgetting a handful of other one. Jalen Brunson, I believe, went to Villanova. There's just so many Villanova guys in the NBA right now that I really like, and I knew he was going to be such a good pickup for the Suns. And again, I just said that they're the Bright Future Suns, but I mean, obviously they're here now. They're here and ready to compete. They're ready to make the playoffs finally, and I'm excited to see this team in the playoffs. I think they could do some damage in the playoffs. It's obviously going to take some time getting adjusted because it'll be the first playoffs for basically everyone in their rotation. I mean, they obviously have some veterans like Jay Crowder. I already mentioned Chris Paul, Frank Kaminsky. I'm not sure if Frank Kaminsky has ever made the playoffs. I know he's been on the Hornets for some time. I don't know if he ever was in the playoffs with, the Kemba Walker Hornets. Who knows? I'm not entirely sure. I have to fact check that. But Cameron Johnson and DeAndre Ayton. Cameron Johnson didn't have the best of games in this one. Had just 5 points, 2 of 7 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. We know he can shoot from 3. That's what he was really billed as coming into the NBA out of UNC. Cameron Johnson, a great 3-point shooter. Didn't necessarily display it in this one, but again, I really like his potential. Him and Mikal Bridges, I feel like a lot of people were kind of sleeping on them when they were coming out of college, but the Suns, they got 2 really, really solid picks there. And then, obviously, DeAndre Ayton, the former number 1 overall pick in the 2018 draft, he had a huge game against arguably the best center in the NBA. I mean, he was right there with Jokic all night. 27 points and 13 rebounds, shot 11 of 13 from the field. DeAndre Ayton was absolutely phenomenal, and I think he had a pretty slow start to the season, but as it's gone on, he's really found chemistry with Chris Paul. Chris Paul was finding him early on in the game, a few really good looks. And then, from Devin Booker as well. Devin Booker's prowess as a facilitator, I feel like, again, that's probably because that he's playing alongside one of the best passers in NBA history in Chris Paul, and that's just rubbing off on him. DeAndre Ayton is really hitting his stride. And, in that draft class, obviously, he's always going to get compared to Luka Doncic, excuse me. Trae Young. Colin Sexton is another player who's been balling out recently. I'm blanking on who else was in that draft class. But DeAndre Ayton, he's always going to get compared to those guys. And, early on, he was labeled as a bust because he didn't live up to the expectations of, or really just live up to the standards of the other people I just mentioned early on in his career. But now you really see why he was drafted number 1 overall. And, obviously it would have helped to have someone like Luka Doncic on this team. But DeAndre Ayton has really stepped up recently for the Suns. And, I just love his potential as a player. He's a great rebounder. I mean, he's battling for rebounds. He was battling for rebounds all night against, again, Jokic, one of the best centers in the NBA. He was giving him problems. I mean, obviously, Jokic isn't known for his defense, but DeAndre Ayton was just tit for tat right there with Jokic all night. And, I mean, in a few years, he could be one of the top centers in the NBA. I mean, Jokic is going to be there. I think Embiid, he's obviously going to be there. I mean, really, DeAndre Ayton is really going to be one of the top centers in the NBA, I think, in a few years. He's so skilled already. And, as he continues to build chemistry with Devin Booker, with Chris Paul, it's only going to help his game. And, again, he's been so good for them. And I think that the Nuggets and Suns have another game tomorrow, or I guess today, technically, when you're hearing this, on Saturday. So we'll get a rematch of these two teams and see how that works. I guess two things that probably we'll want to look at is, I think down the stretch in this game, Devin Booker and Chris Paul were kind of grimacing near the end of the game. I think Devin Booker, I don't know exactly what happened. He was battling for a rebound near the end of the game. And, a lot of bodies just hit the floor. And I think maybe someone must have landed on his leg or on his ankle or something. And he was taken out of the game with like a minute left. And I was questioning, why is Devin Booker on the bench right now? Did he foul out? I was checking like, no, he didn't foul out. What's wrong? And, the replay was kind of inconclusive. You couldn't really tell what happened, but you could see he was grimacing and kind of like not necessarily limping, but just, just struggling to get off the court. So definitely going to be on the watch for that to see if he's going to be able to play tomorrow. I would imagine he's a competitor. He's very tough, so I would imagine he's going to be out there for them. And then Chris Paul, something happened with his knee. I don't think it's anything serious. I think he might have just bumped the knees with, I think it was Gary Harris near the end of the game. So that's obviously going to be something to watch as well. So two players for the Suns that could be dealing with some injuries heading into their game 2 against the Nuggets. Technically game 3 because these two teams had played earlier this season, but the back-to-back games, game 2 between these two teams. But hey, this is probably the longest episode that I've done, for any game so far this season. But I think it deserved it. It was a really fun watch. And both teams don't want to read too much into this game. Obviously, one game is one game, and despite the fact that it was a nationally televised game, that doesn't make it any more important than any other regular season game. Really, it's just. But this was definitely a big win for the Nuggets. This is a game the Nuggets needed to win. They had just beaten the Thunder in their last game, but they've strung off a few good wins recently. They also beaten the Warriors as well. So, it was a rough start for Denver to start this season, but I think with Michael Porter Jr. coming back, with Jokic playing as well as he is, with Jamal Murray hopefully finding his footing as the season progresses, I think the Nuggets will string off a couple of wins and get back into the playoffs. And then the Suns, they started extremely hot to start the season. They somewhat cooled off a little bit here as of late, but again, I think both teams are playoff bound, and I'm excited to watch both of them in the playoffs. I'm very excited about the future of both of these teams. Both of these teams are pretty young, so this was a really fun matchup, and one that we could see potentially, for years to come in the Western Conference playoffs, because again, both of these teams are really young and have a lot of room for improvement. But again, this was definitely the longest episode that I've done for any game. And but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know if there's any teams that I should cover that I haven't covered yet. I'm gonna try and step away from the Nuggets for the time being and try and focus on some other teams. There was a really good game between the Celtics and the Sixers before this game, before the Nuggets Suns game that I watched, but I decided to do this game instead. But yeah, just let me know if there's any teams that I should cover moving forward, any games that you want me to cover and I can watch. So comment that down below. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more content, both for In the Bonus and the Full Court Report NBA show that is posted every Monday. And be on the lookout for the next episode, because the next episode is going to be a lot of fun with myself, Jorie Mickens, Justin Sadovi, and Chris Tobias. We're going to be talking about some trends in the NBA and things like that. So it's going to be a really fun, very fun discussion. But thank you so much for listening, everyone, and stay safe.